Welcome to the Skiffy and Fancy Show.
The only good mannequin.
I'm Daniel.
I'm DanDan.
And listeners may be wondering where the cherubic voice of Sean is. Why is this not streaming live on the Twitch? Well, Sean is off at Capricorn right now, and though he's very excited about that, he's also exceptionally annoyed right now that he's missing this interview. Because today, for our first interview of 2026, we're joined by New York Times bestselling author Stephen Graham Jones. Welcome, Stephen.
Hello. Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Hopefully you'll come on again and Sean can have a chance to talk to you too, because I know he has loads of questions beyond the hour even. So for those of you who may not know, Stephen Graham Jones is the author of 35 or so novels and collections, mostly but not exclusively marketed as horror, and there's some novellas and comic books in there as well. He lives and teaches in Boulder, Colorado. Not only has Stephen been often nominated, he has frequently won awards from all over the place. You can find out on his website, which you'll get later on at the end, I'm sure, a list of many of those prestigious awards. Some of his most recent published works are Earth Divers, I Was a Teenage Slasher, The Buffalo Hunter, and Killer on the Road. But today we're here to talk to him about the recent Tor Nightfire reissue of his 2020 novella, Night of the Mannequins, originally released through the Tor.com label with Ellen Datlow as editor.
Before we get into our discussion, a reminder to our listeners to please share your questions and comments with us at skiffyandfanny.com/listener suggestions. If you aren't already, join us on Twitch for Sean's Alphabet streams most every Friday at 7 p.m. Central to be part of our interactive live streaming show format. Finally, be sure to review and spread the word about our show. Help support us through our Patreon and be part of our Torture Cinema polls, live watches, or other special Patreon-only events on Discord. A mere US dollar a month will give you all that power.
Yeah, and I think the offer still stands that if we get a certain increase in Patreon sponsors, we are going to force Sean to watch the live Cats movie, which is
an amazing movie.
Yes, a fine example of pure cinema. Okay, so Stephen, start off with if you could just maybe give us a brief rundown on what Night of the Mannequins is about.
Yeah, Night of the Mannequins is a novella that it's Sawyer, this kid Sawyer Grimes, and his friend group. They are living in Rockwall, Texas. They're at the end of their high school, so they're going to blast off into different directions, as always, this happens. And there is possibly a killer mannequin stalking them for a prank they pulled.
Indeed.
Can you tell us what made you and Tor decide to reissue it?
Nightfire recently did that for Mapping the Interior. I guess it was last year about this time. And the book found a whole new audience. It had done great on its own in 2017, but then last year it probably did even more. And so Night of the Mannequins came out in 2020. And now Nightfire, Tor.com and Nightfire are both under the Macmillan or Tor umbrella, of course. And so they figured, let's put out Night of the Mannequins again. And I really dig that new cover that they came up with. That's excellent.
It's a wonderful, very evocative cinema and such. And fits perfectly.
Yeah. Which ties in with, the reoccurring theme of the superhero movie that keeps coming back.
That appears throughout.
And the prank, right?
So one of the things to really dive right into it, one of the things that struck me about this is at times I was thinking like, okay, is he just showing off here by writing this? Because it's a deceptively very simple concept, right? Very straightforward, short format too, but then you're combining many different subgenres in here, twists. There's a dichotomy that exists between literally what's happening and sort of symbolically what might underlie a lot of this. And so I guess my general question is how do you find the balance for such complexities, particularly in a short format? Is that something that just comes naturally to you, or?
I think it just happens naturally. I never really feel that responsible for that kind of stuff. If it works, then I'm always thrilled. And if it doesn't work, then I guess I'm not sad either because I just write stories that I think are funny and scary and entertaining. And I guess because they come from a single person in a single moment of my life, that they do tend to kind of cohere in a way. And maybe that gives them eventually some sort of, I don't know, thematic resonance or meaning or something. But I never write with any plan. This means that, or this stands for that, or I want to push this agenda or push back against this. I'm kind of afraid of ever doing it like that because I feel like I might start writing for the critics, and I think you should write for everyone.
I like that. I tied into that where you said you don't write with an agenda. Like, I'll be honest, like I agree with Daniel that when I first read it, it seemed very simple. But then I kept thinking about it, as I not only thinking about this podcast, but just thinking about the story. And Sawyer is very much like to me, and obviously this is my reading into it, but acting out his kind of savior fantasy throughout the story, like he's trying to save them. How intentionally metaphoric of that was that of like a kind of a white savior trope of a toxic
Yeah.
savior mentality, and like was that
Mhm.
something you even considered or was thinking about while you're writing it?
I didn't even think about it. I mean, to me, Sawyer is native. I never specify his tribe, but his mom is native. His father isn't. His cousin Shanna is not really part of his direct family, so they don't look all that similar. But no, I like that. I didn't even consider that even a little bit. And I'd be afraid to consider that because I might shape the story around it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had the exact very similar reading too, particularly with sort of donning that very pale mannequin mask and such throughout it. It just seemed symbolic to me, but it's very interesting that I mean that's what art is about, right? And literature and such is about. Like it's not necessarily what you intend or what you're working towards
Yeah.
directly trying to do. It's what sort of organically happens.
I agree. Yeah, like I think artist intent is so it doesn't matter even a little bit. I don't know. People take it into consideration for reasons I can't figure out. Because it doesn't matter. What matters is the product, and what matters is what each reader gets out of the story. Because I think each reader gets out of anything they engage what they need to get out of it at that moment in their lives. And so if 100 people read it, hopefully there's 100 different reads. That makes me happy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, nice.
And so, one of the things that I was struck with is that Sawyer is kind of like stuck on this path here and begins taking steps. And then once he's on the route, there's like no turning back. And there's sort of a force of trying to make it make sense because he's on it and can't escape it. And the other work that I at least have read from you, a major one at least, aside from like some short stories, is Buffalo Hunter Hunter. And I see some of that happening in there too. Is that something that you'd say has reappeared in your work or
Yeah, I imagine it has. There's probably a different flavor of it in most of my books. But yeah, Sawyer is just rationalizing to himself at kind of a furious pace, like we all do. We
Yeah.
all try to make whatever action we choose or decision we make, we try to wrap it up in reasons, and then we want those reasons to be compelling and make sense. So Sawyer is definitely doing that. I've had people ask me like questions that involve like an unreliable narrator. They call Sawyer an unreliable narrator, and really, I think there is no such thing as a reliable narrator. Any narrator who's telling you a story is choosing this, not that. So they're not giving you the full story. And sometimes they make themselves look better. Sometimes they're self-effacing as a rhetorical strategy to get you to come over to their side of the story. There's all kinds of different tactics, but I think Sawyer is reliable. I do think he's deluding himself,
Mm.
which is a different. Maybe it's just moving the unreliability to a different place.
We're all kind of the hero of our own hero or villain of our own
Yeah,
story, and we narrate based off of that. I like that. Yeah.
exactly.
yeah? I
Um. Oh, go ahead.
no go you're
Oh, I was just gonna say, kind of tying into that. I know you write, like I've read quite a bit of your work, and I know you deal. I obviously have a lot of native characters, and you also have a lot of slasher, like not just horror, but kind of slasher specific leanings. Is there any particular kind of tropes you like playing with either of those two areas? I know that's a big question, especially
Mhm.
including both of them, but both of them, historically, there's a lot of tropes around both areas, and I was just wondering if there's anything you specifically like
Yeah.
playing with.
No, I mean, tell you the truth, all the conventions, all the genres, I love to crawl inside them and see if I can tell the story according to the kind of beats or formula that they lay down, but also finding what room I can find between those beats or the elements of the formula to have fun in. I'm not saying that the beats themselves aren't fun. They are, like the third wheel body dump in the slasher. That's a blast. But what can I do? What can I do that's different? Um, like maybe an example of that would be I think it House on Sorority Row, or it could be Sorority House Massacre. I get those two confused all the time. The third real body dump I was talking about is um, the person who's been killing all these sorority sisters has been and their tenders and everything have been stashing their bodies in the pool, which is a wonderful hiding space at night, and so when they get discovered, it's a different sort of discovery than when Laurie Strode in Halloween finds that guy in the cabinet all booby trapped, and those are different kinds
Yeah.
of third real body dumps, and I love to find different ways to do the same thing. That just thrills me to no end.
Yeah, I kind of love it. I mean, growing up on the res, slashers was such a big part of it, and I've also, I don't know if this is true, but I read that you're a big Louis L'Amour fan, or at least had read a lot of Louis L'Amour.
Yeah, I've read
And they're
yeah,
and
I've read it.
that
I think by the time I
Western.
was, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
my dad. Oh no, my dad has the entire collection. But go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, no, actually, I was at a flea market about 3 months ago, and there was like 5 o'clock, and it was closing down. I was walking out, and this one dude calls out to me from his booth, and he says, "You," and I was like, "What?" Well, I didn't steal nothing. And he says, "Come here," and so I came over to his table, and he said, "Do you want these?" And he pulls the like little draped tablecloth off of a table, and I thought, "What am I about to see?" But what I was about to see was the whole Louis L'Amour leather-bound collection. Like
Holy.
probably 112 novels or something. I think he was going to give it to me for 40 or $50. And I wanted those so bad because, yes, you're right. By the time I was 11, I'd read all 95 of them that existed at the time. And I kept up with him after that. He's like, Louis L'Amour's Westerns are kind of like really a part of my writerly DNA kernel, I guess you could call it. But I didn't buy all those books because I already have more. I'm about to have to give away probably 3 or 4 thousand books. So I can't
Wow.
be buying more. I can't be buying a big set that can take up two or three shelves.
we all go through that, yeah.
Yeah. Because I do know, like Louis, which I find interesting, because Louis L'Amour and slashers can be very formulaic.
Yeah.
And reading your books, like they're not. You know what I mean? Like there's certain authors like Dean Koontz, you read it, you know exactly what you're going to get. Louis L'Amour, you know exactly what you're going to get. Slasher, you know it's going to follow this very, and you seem very eclectic. So you kind of
Yeah.
seem like you break your own mold a lot of times.
Yeah. I mean, I think as much as I try to adhere to the established formula and set of conventions, um, because I'm the one writing it, and no one else is writing it, it comes out weird. And I think that's how it always is. Like when somebody tries to rewrite a Stephen King story or a Raymond Carver story, they think, "Oh man, everybody's gonna see what I'm doing." But when somebody else reads it, they're like, "This is weird and not recognizable as anything." And I think that's probably how all these genres work when I start writing about them. I think it's so obvious that I'm aping Halloween, but it actually has wildly diverges. But I love those divergences because that's how a genre stays alive if it keeps mutating and changing. If we put it under a glass bowl and say you stay like that forever, you found your good form, it's gonna freeze and die or suffocate anyways, and
Yeah,
I don't want that.
you need to throw in a Nightmare on Elm Street in there every once in a while.
Oh, I know, I do, huh? Yeah.
No, I mean like when you get a slasher formula and then Freddy comes in and he's funny and like it just
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
well,
the
he
humor and
spoke,
horror
like,
mix works perfect.
yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, yeah, Freddy Krueger, like Jason and Michael never spoke. And
Yeah.
then in '84 we get Nightmare and Freddy's dropping quips everywhere, and that was revolutionary.
Yeah. I heard it wasn't initially intended. Not to go off on a different thing. Yeah. England just started to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's what I heard. Was England just started to talk, and West was like, "Yeah, this works."
Wow, I did not know that. That is really cool.
Oh wow, I'm really happy I could share slasher trivia you didn't know. That made my day.
Good for Craven for rolling with that. Or seeing the potential of it.
Yeah.
So
I bet with directors it is kind of about knowing what to not say no to or something like that. Kind of like writing. I think one of the biggest parts of like novel writing is knowing what not to delete or having an instinct about what not to delete anyways. And I bet some version of that is for directors too. Maybe it happens in the editing room, but I think it probably happens in the moment, like Craven saying to Robert Englund, go for it,
Yeah.
So you mentioned just a moment ago sort of like the tropes of or aping slashers like Halloween and such. And what I found really interesting about Night of the Mannequins is that not only is slashers and horror such a big part of it, but that superhero genre is such a big part too. And so you have the recurring series of movies that they're talking about that they had snuck in to see, that they're watching with the prank that comes up later as people watching. And throughout that, I just, for whatever reason, just kept thinking of Avengers, and particularly Infinity War and Endgame, and thinking this Sawyer is like Thanos in a lot of regards, but rather than being on sort of like this epic cosmic scale, you have here it's like everything down on a human scale. And I appreciated that if somebody's like considering where to read this, one of my arguments would be that it does blend those two tropes of horror and superhero adventure stories in ways that are interesting and familiar, but completely different.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. And Avenger, Infinity War, and Endgame were pretty much what I was thinking of. With this novella. So good eye, good ear for that. But also I think I just signed some contract with Marvel, which is really signing a contract with Disney, which is signing a contract with Mickey Mouse. And so I know how they don't like you messing with their toys,
Right.
And so that's why I never said like Thor or anything like that.
Was that part of the Marvel Vision or Marvel Voices?
It probably, well, it might have been. I may have done something else with them before that because I wrote Night of the Mannequins. I want to say it was about 2018 probably, and I don't think I had done Marvel Voices by then, but I may have done something else for them. I just don't remember anymore.
All becomes a blur.
But I guess if I did it back then, then Marvel wouldn't have been Mickey Mouse either, would it? That was before the sale.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
I think so.
So if I may, I wanted to change a little bit of direction. You've alluded to sort of like writing for both, in some senses, I guess yourself, but then also for everybody. And I'm very curious about your thoughts on reader responses to your work, because as I mentioned, I had only read otherwise the Buffalo Hunter Hunter, but I've long wanted to read your work. It's always been on sort of like to be read pile, and I see your name featured so often in horror discussions, and it's so dichotomous of people in general, even if they don't like your work, they think it's quality, but it's not for them. And there seems to be a very strong reaction of, I find Stephen Graham Jones' work so hard to follow or difficult to understand. I did not have that issue at all, so it's sort of baffling to me. But I'm just curious what your take on all of that is, and whether you can see it or not.
That of course it's baffling to me because it all makes perfect sense to me, but you can't ever, one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a writer, I think, is to lay off a work not working for a reader on the reader instead of yourself, because you've always got to be the one to blame, the one who wrote it, because that's the only way you get better is if you have accountability. You're like, oh, well, I should have done it more clear. I should have been more direct, something like that. And so I'm always working towards that to try to be, I don't know, less untransparent. That's a self a complicated way to say that, right? But as for why my stuff probably gets that response sometimes, I bet it's because I lean really heavily on what this critic and writer David Joust calls indirect interior monologue or dialogue also, which is the character's thoughts bubbling up to the surface of the narration, but part of that bubbling up process changes the person and the tense of it. And so we're basically getting the rhythmic kind of contours of this character's thoughts and some of the content at the same level as the exposition, the narration. And I love that. That's the only way I know how to write. Maybe someday I'll learn to do it differently, but I don't really want to, I like it when it happens like this. I think when you tell a story like that, you can tell a 700-page novel in 300 pages, and that economy is, to me, that economy is a gift to the reader. You're saying you're going to cross 300 pages, but you're going to feel 700 pages,
Yeah, that
Well, and it leaves
totally makes sense to me.
Well, and it leaves room for the readers to think about it, right? And to actually engage with it, I think, in a way that... I know you said you don't like the term unreliable narrator, because I agree with you that all narrators are unreliable, but I think that when we have to think about what is the person saying or what are they thinking and how is that... Like, what do I imagine the reality actually being?
Yeah.
How does that interact? And I think it's a real skill to be able to play with that.
Yeah, to me, it's so productive to play in that like indeterminate space. It's just nothing. I don't know why everyone doesn't do it. But nevertheless, oftentimes I'll read stuff that will have a character's thoughts in italics, and then it's tagged like, I'm going to go over there in italics, comma, he thought. So it's like it's like Stephanie Meyer saying Bella whispered quietly. It's redundant.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you find any difficulty in initially getting published with that sort of style? Was there a lot of pushback from...
No, my
anyone?
first novel, The Fast Red Road, came out in 2000. This was like 2 or 3 years before that David Joust article on Point of View came out. It's called From Long Shots to X-Rays, and so I didn't really have any terminology for what I was doing back then. And I wrote the book in '98. I definitely didn't have a terminology for it then, but that first novel is easily the densest and most uncrack openable of all my novels. Like you read it, I suspect I have not read it myself for 28 years, probably, maybe 27. So I suspect, like from my dim memories of it, that you can read the whole thing and feel like a lot of words have washed over you, but what actually happened, and so I feel like my whole career I've been moving from that kind of density and probably what I want to call complexity, but it's probably really just complicatedness. I've been moving up like a slow, gradual incline or staircase to learn to be more direct and I don't know, easily digestible, I guess. But there is a point at which like being easily digestible kind of doesn't help the work too, So the hard part is finding that balance point. Mm-hmm.
Because that density and complexity, that sort of what I was thinking as you were talking before was that's a great way to get to psychology of humans, right? I mean, because our psychology is dense and impenetrable and confusing,
Exactly.
right? And so playing with that is the way you can really honestly explore it and make it compelling as well. It's just balancing that with also, like you say, a digestible story or plot that you can go along with and enjoy and such. Yeah.
Completely agree. And what I really like is if I can come up with a storyline or a tension in the plot that is pulling the reader ahead like by the face inexorably, then they're probably going to be more willing to parse through this or that complication or whatever you're going to call it, And I think a story that works out your brain muscles is not bad. I think we need exercise,
Yes.
I agree.
That's what I'm always trying to push on my students, at least.
Mhm.
But, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, critical engagement with the world is the most important thing. Well, maybe being compassionate is more important, but to be able to look at something critically and not completely trust it, but also be able to figure out a way through it or around it or over it or something. That can change the world, I think.
Agreed. And I think there's something to be said for trusting your audience, right? Like you are trusting us when we read your book to be able to at least partially understand or be able to get through some of that confusion, or at least we'll be willing to do that work.
hmm I mean, I hope. I mean, but also at the same time, I don't want to lure people in like, "Ooh, this is gonna be a fun Jason Voorhees type story," and then they feel betrayed 20 pages in because it's not reading like a Jason Voorhees story. I mean, maybe I do want to do that a little bit, but I don't think I would keep a readership if I exclusively pulled that kind of I don't know, bait and switch on people.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's enough readership that appreciates subverted expectations or is willing to go the bait and switch to a degree and actually looks for that sometimes. So again, it's
No, I
all
feel
the balance of it, right?
it's all that tipping point. Yeah, and I think that tipping point does not stay stable either. I think it moves under us. So we have to always be agile and go with it.
Well, and I think you do a really good job. I mean, you've obviously found success kind of jumping genres within the same story. And I think for myself, like for my own writing, I have a hard time picking a genre or
Mhm.
like what genre it is. And so seeing somebody be able to actually like jump around genres within the same story and still find success and make a really good product, I think it's great because the natural world doesn't fit into these good little boxes and nice little labels, and so it
Yeah.
makes it feel much more real.
No, I totally agree. Like when you walk down the street or moving through a food court at a mall or whatever, um, those genres don't exist. You don't walk out of a western and into a romance. The genres are always overlaid or interpenetrating or mingled together, whatever figurative language you want to use for it. But they're never just one thing. Even when I read a western, it might be a western more or less, but it'll have action in there. It'll have romance in there. It'll have all other kinds of genres, and I love that all the DNA is like crossed with each other.
Agreed.
And it
Uh,
allows you to not know what you're like when you start something. It gives you the options of going in many different directions as well, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Changing directions just a little bit, if it's okay. As a native writer, and you write a lot of native characters, um, I know in the space there's a lot of discussion of, when do we make the character kind of more distinctly native or directly references native, and what are we willing to share about our own cultures? Because we know there's a lot of issue with think people getting things wrong and turning it into a fantasy, but also people taking information and trying to subvert it or treat it bad wrong. How do you kind of decide which characters you're going to be more clearly this is native and clearly this isn't, and then how much? And I know this is a two-part question, but how much of that kind of culture and learning and stuff that you have? How do you kind of decide what you're willing to share and where you're willing to highlight and
Yeah,
shadow, I guess?
I guess deciding on how to implement what or put whatever on the page, the issue to me is always, do I feel like I'm selling my culture to get higher book sales? And that's always, hopefully I never do that. I try to push back against that every chance I get. And I guess to answer the first question, for me, the default setting is native. It is indigenous. It is Indian,
Amen.
and I have an essay about that somewhere. What's it called? Being Indian is not a superpower. Yeah, it's somewhere out
Yeah.
there. And
Hmm.
Yeah,
and
I know it.
yeah, and I mean, it comes from when I was working on my master's. I must have been 23 this year. That year, um, I was taking a fiction workshop. First couple of stories I turned in, people just tore them up like it's supposed to happen. Then the third story, the main character, um, somebody asked him, "What are you?" Because he had darker skin or something like that, and he said, "Yeah, I'm Blackfeet or whatever." I don't remember. I don't remember. It's been more than 30 years, I guess. But um, and when I came to workshop to get that story torn apart, instead of tearing it apart, everyone like had their sacred eyes on, and they were like, this is important material. This means something. You're telling your culture." And I was like, what are you talking about? The previous two stories were doing the same thing, you know. And but I'm really lucky that happened to me so early on when I was learning how to write, because it told me that the audience wants to position themselves to the text as if it's important and sacred. And so I need to always be doing things to convince them otherwise, or to not let them do that anyways.
I love that.
So it's an it seems. Electric literature is where it
Oh, cool.
was,
Yeah, that sounds right.
where it came
Sounds
up
right.
for the essay. I just found it. But I like just browsing it. One of the texts they have highlighted is don't want people asking when is the Indianness going to activate in terms
Yeah,
of the
no, it's
plot.
hilarious.
And
I know, when do they open their shirt and say, "I'm
yes,
Indian"?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. When do they break out the sage and start tracking
Yeah,
somebody?
Yeah.
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 But I've had I've workshopped so many stories of my own and novels where the first question I get back is, "I can tell this character is Indian," and then the second part of that question is, "Why does that matter?" You know, and like, how is this Indianness, this indigenousness, this nativeness gonna save the day or impact the plot or have some thematic resonance and all? And I think those are all terrible, terrible questions. You don't ask that about non-Indian characters, you know, and that's what I guess I'm trying to say in that superpower write-up is it's okay for Indian to be the default setting. You know, it doesn't have to activate ever.
We could be tech support.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean, you look at from comics, you mentioned Marvel earlier. You look at from
Yeah.
comics to movies to books. I mean, how many native superheroes don't do tracking? You know, I think
Hmm.
Forge is a great example because there was only one story that ever mentioned him with any sort of shamanism or anything like that because he's just a tech guy. And I think that it's okay for that. They accidentally got something right, I'll say. And I
Yeah, no, I
think that
totally agree.
watching you get it purposely right is great. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
and I do recommend the Native's Not a Superhero or a Superpower. It's a fun read.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So along with that, one of the questions we had, it's actually Dan, you had put it in there, but sort of like what tropes in horror or around natives that you particularly enjoy playing with, or maybe want to go into that you haven't done before?
Yeah, like, the type of native character I resist the most, and this is the kind that shows up the most as well, is what I call the coin drop character. Like if the people in this horror story, or usually a movie, sometimes a novel, like they realize there's something in town, killing people and putting them in chrysalises or something like that, or cocoons, and so they run around town trying to figure out what's doing this, and they say, I found a story about this from 1850, and that means this has been here a long time. I'm going to go ask the Indian dude lives at the edge of town. And so they go out to his place, and they basically like reach out and put a quarter in his mouth, and he recites like some old legend or some old story. And then they're like, "Oh, that solves it." And then they leave, and he's just left standing there. He has no arc. He's an automaton basically. And that's the kind of character I resist the most when I engage it, when I see it in a movie or a story or a novel or a novella, I guess. Anywhere I see it, I don't like it. But and so I'm always trying to be sure that if I have a tertiary character or even a really, really super side character who is indigenous, I try to make them palpably real in a way that we don't dismiss them. We don't consider them an automaton. Which I mean, basically, now that I say all that, all I'm really saying is I like to put real people on the page, or I like my people
Right.
on the page to be real. You know.
And I think we can see some tensions with that. Like if you look at, is it Children of the Corn 2 or 3 where the native guy, the scientist is a native guy, and then
I don't
halfway
remember
through the so he, I forget what actor it is, but he's a super skeptical scientist for like the first half or more of the movie, and then they need info dump on old legends, and he's suddenly magical shaman man with all the answers, and then 10 minutes later he's back to skeptical scientist. And I think that, they like had this character and they just completely like got rid of it. To your point, they needed that info dump, and they're like,
Yeah.
well, he's Indian,
Yeah.
he's a skin, he could do it.
No, we often become like expositional tools in stories, and I'm never very comfortable with that, But at the same time, I don't want to reinscribe it by making some other culture be my expositional character in a story. I want to be even-handed with everyone, but I'm probably most tuned in to what I consider slights against Indian people, and so that's probably what I push back against the most.
Do you find that makes you more sensitive, as you mentioned, to like other cultures and other peoples when you see something that might be a trope applied to them?
I would hope it does, and I think that's the way that all like people who are readers should all find themselves in that position where their empathy muscles have been worked out enough that they can apply them more readily in whatever situation,
They say readers are the more literature you read, the more empathetic you become. And I completely agree with that because sort of how I grew up, opinions I held, or things that I learned, they changed over time because of what I read, what I experienced on a page, people I met in the world as well, right? Not just in a page. But I would say as I began not just accepting what I saw, maybe like on the television screen or in a book, and began thinking about, is this using this character just as a tool of like their whole being, their ethnicity, their culture? Is it just serving as a tool and that's it? Or is it actually being something developed and vital here? As I began noticing that for particular groups that sort of are in the zeitgeist of like, we should be more conscionable about, I found that developing for others as well, I think. So I completely agree. I'm never perfect at it, but I completely agree that it's something that develops.
Yeah, and that I mean, you're right. It is empathy, but it's also critical engagement with everything. I think that if we can have empathy, be compassionate, and critically engage things, I think we have a chance of making it 100 more years. Maybe.
Let's just get through the next 20.
Yes.
The next three.
Exactly.
Three.
The next few weeks. Even.
Yeah.
So a random question is, I wanted to ask you as a horror author, another thing that I'll frequently see amongst horror fans is this desire for a work to scare them. And that almost becomes the defining feature of horror. Now, I definitely don't believe that that's the only thing that horror should be about. But I actually question, like, is there fiction? Is there horror fiction that scares you? Because for me, it's almost like only reality ends up really making me feel scared and fearful and getting in that gut. I find I'm hard pressed to find fiction that ever does that to me. And so I'm just kind of curious, am I weird or and how do you feel?
I just figure we all have different thresholds, I imagine, but I think I'm probably a horror writer because I am so spooky. Like everything scares me. There's a Magnum PI episode that really gets under my skin. To get like a woman who might be a ghost, who might not be a ghost, and that like I get nervous watching that. I have constant nightmares and sleep paralysis, and I'm one of those people who, if I'm going from the living room to the bedroom at 2 a.m, I've got to like carefully get all the lights in the right sequence so they're moving with me. So yeah, I'm definitely scared by books. I'm probably more scared by books than I am by film, by movies, because a movie is out there, but a book is happening in my head because I'm having to activate it with my eyes, And so I think the book, for me and the way I am, it has a chance to plant itself deeper and arise after I'm asleep,
Okay, now sometimes I wish I could experience that more.
Have you always been this interested in horror? Is that one of the ways then you're not only writing it to excise it, but also I mean, you obviously have a love for slashers and other horror movies and other media. Is that a way you kind of deal with that?
I think it is, and the way I would describe it is like if you're locked in a big room with no furniture, and there's a honey badger in there with you, then you're gonna always keep your eye on that honey badger. You're never gonna turn your back on that honey badger. It's gonna be the sole fascination of your existence in that room, and that to me, I think, is why I'm always looking at horror because I'm so scared of horror that I don't want to let it get behind me. Because then it's all over. So I'm always watching it. It's the honey badger that I can't look away from.
Yeah.
That is an awesome image. I love that.
And good advice. If I'm locked
Yes,
in a room
that's
with a
it.
honey badger,
That is.
Yeah.
All right. We should get close to closing up. So, any last questions?
I have one more, and it's just kind of off the top of my head just because of the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, I was up in Blackfeet area for quite a few years and know people from there. Knowing that like Lily Gladstone and I know several authors that come from that nation and all of that, and I think the Pyramid of Needs was stolen from your guys' culture. Like, is there a reason you think that so many creatives, like your nation, produces so many great creatives?
James Welch is probably the foremost of them all,
Yeah.
huh? That's a good question. I never thought about that. I
Because
know
if you go
that.
to, oh, good.
I mean, we Blackfeet have really big heads.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe that
Yeah.
has something to do with it. I don't know.
Yeah. I've heard that before. Yeah. You go to the indigenous literary, whatever in Montana, they hold in Missoula. Like it's put on by, oh man, he's going to be mad at me because I'm spacing his name. Put on
Sterling?
by a black, yeah.
Yeah,
But
Sterling
yep.
Hollywell Mountain. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's a great guy. It's put on by him. Like, there's always a bunch of Blackfeet there. I mean, there's other Montana natives too, but it always struck me that you know, you guys just
Oh,
happen to have a lot of like that particular industry or that particular area of specialty. I
yeah.
mean,
That's a good
with
point. I
Inuit, we're
wonder.
just good at everything, but I know you guys, have specialized.
Yeah. I wonder. I mean, I think we're like lying is like when you are up on the grasslands, the plains, the prairie, like we are since we got Glacier Park taken away. Um, I wonder out there in like the big nothing if you entertain yourself with lies. It could be part of it. But I think also as for like Jake Arrowtop and all these other writers that are coming up, Blackfeet, all these other Blackfeet writers that are coming up, I should say. I wonder if James Welch doing what he did, making his mark on the world that he did, starting in the late '60s with his poetry, I guess. I wonder if he kind of opened the door in a way that's allowing a lot of us to come through. I'm not sure. Like
The
he's
next,
like he's like the star that we set our sights on. And that's probably really helpful.
Like an unconscious inspiration or like knowing that it's attainable?
Yeah, knowing it's attainable. That's it. Look, he made it. Maybe I can too.
well, and he seems very open to helping people. I've known a few other native authors that from before. I think the ones coming up now, like Darcy Little Badger, and a lot of them are very open to creativity and sharing and helping and supporting. But I have known some of that generation that were maybe less so. Not to speak
Yeah.
ill of elders, but so him being open and seemingly helpful, I think it's
Yeah,
awesome.
and when I watch videos of him like doing events around the world, he's just so like nice. He's not one of those
Yeah,
dudes who's gonna get into a big argument. He's gonna laugh because I think he knows what really matters. That's what it feels like.
yeah,
Mhm.
very cool.
Mhm.
Well, we're going to have to get all those names and such into the show notes. We're going to have to make sure to share those.
Mhm.
Well, can you tell us what you're working on next, or any of the things you're working on next?
I've been writing so many stories lately. I bet since November, I've probably written 17 stories and one novella, I guess. But a lot of the
Wow.
stories have been probably 13 of them have been flash fictions, which is to say, under 5 or 7 pages, which is my favorite length to work in. But did a novella, which hopefully is scary, and it's a haunted house novella. And right now, I'm actually for like 6 hours a day. I've been working on notes from my editor for a forthcoming novel, which I can't announce yet. And next up, I mean, if I don't, the problem is I always have plans what to do next, but then another novel idea occurs and I write that novel
Right.
instead, you know. But it usually works out. But I wrote a novel a few years ago that I think is all right, but it's doing that thing we were talking about earlier where it's kind of uncrackable. It's like dense in a way that doesn't allow the reader in, I feel like. And so I finally figured out how to retell that novel. So I'm going to break it down to like 15% of what it was and build it back up in a different way. And
Wow.
that'll take 2 or 3 months probably.
Yeah.
That's commendable. That's tough to do.
17 since November seems like a lot. Is there something specifically scary?
Oh yeah, well, hopefully a lot of them are scary.
Everything.
Yeah.
And so our final question then is just where can folks find you? If they want to find out more.
StephenGrahamJones.com or Blue Sky. Those are the 2 places I am. I'm also on Goodreads, I guess. But StephenGrahamJones.com is my website, and Blue Sky is the place where I look at weird memes and stuff, you know?
Yes. Thank goodness we have that now.
I know.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us today, Stephen. We really appreciate it. And
this has been great talking with y'all. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. And please come back. We'll love talking to you about future works. So.
All right. Thank y'all.
All right. So that's it, folks. If you'd like to let us know what you thought about this episode, send us an email at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com or join our Discord via our Patreon page. You can also find us on Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, YouTube, and more. All those links are at skiffyandfanty.com/skiffythings. Also, don't miss us every Friday at 7 p.m. Central on Twitch for the live show format. That's on Sean's twitch.tv/alphabetstreams. Finally, if you like what you do, please spread the word about us, leave us reviews on your favorite podcast apps, and support us at patreon.com/skiffyandfanty.
Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters: Andrea the Alluring, Cameron the Chthonic, Caroline the Benevolent, Carrie the Divine, Chris the Condescent, Daniel the Cultured, David the Debonair, JC the Jocular, Jeff the Gracious, Joseph the Jovial, Juan the Junctional, KB the Kind, Karen the Kickass, Kate the Kinematic, Matthew the Magnificent,
Paul the Pious, Phoebe the Eloquent, Robin the Bold, Ryan the Resilient, Sarah A. the Sensational, Sarah E. the Sublime, Sarah O. the Rapturous, Scott the Gentleman, Stephen the Strange, DanDan the Transient, Thierry the Thorough, Tanya the Triumphant, Trish the Imperturbable, and Victor the Valiant. You can find me at reading1000lives.com. That's 1000 the numeral in there, and also at Reading 1000 Lives on Blue Sky.
And you can find me and Blue Sky at DanDan the Transient, and on my blog, ourorchard.co, has my short stories and everything else, if you care to check them out. But thank you for joining us. And
Yeah, thank you.
Daniel has to make it awkward.
Yeah, I decided that last year we had a year of being happy for our endings, so we'll go back to awkward endings unless Sean overrules me. But for now, I'll just leave it that we'll have to decide, DanDan, what you want to be locked into a room with. It can't be a honey badger. What would be the animal? And so we'll dwell on that and awkward ending and scene.